Okay, I'd like to welcome you back to the Sustainable Urban Governance. This is the second half of the sustainable planning / design. And the way I described it in the last video is that you got three legs of the stool, let's say, of sustainable urban governance. The first one I covered in the video number 6, and that was about public capital. And then video number 7, I talked about the sustainable planning and had to cut it short a little bit. So the second half of the sustainable planning concerns the concepts that Rowe and Van Eaton had presented. And a little side note here, people should go to the opening for this video and find out the link that they need to go to get the 98 slide presentation. And we're going to be starting up on slide 52, going through somewhere like about slide 63. So that way you can follow along with some of the things I'm talking about. But Rowe and Van Eaton had a very interesting concept of how to manage projects sustainably. What they had is called a threshold-based management system, where they looked at 4 different types of environments and had planning according to those 4 types. Oh. First one is called sustainable management, self-sustainable management. This is kind of like in the types of environment where you have wilderness, the back to nature kind of thing, wilderness areas, natural areas. And then we have a little bit more areas where you have more density of impacts by civilization. You have a thing called adaptive management, where you adapt the pristine with what man might want to do in that area. Then you have the third one called conflict management. And conflict management is where you have urban areas, suburban areas kind of bumping up against natural areas, and you have all these conflicts, like deer getting run over by semi-trucks, or raccoons eating out of garbage, or bears breaking into cars that are parked on the side of the road. And then the fourth type of management of the high reliability management. And this is one where you have urban centers, where you have to look more on the sustainability of the urban system as opposed to the natural. And the trick, I suppose, would be to have urban green areas, like where we're at here in the Spanish Plaza in New Orleans by the river, where you have high reliability systems so that like sewer systems don't break, that buildings don't fall on you. There's a lot of risk involved, but what you do, you introduce natural systems to accommodate an area that is a high reliability, like what I'm talking about, urban, but make it environmentally pleasing. Some of the other things that I wanted to talk about is the various things that you look at when you're looking at the 4 aspects of the system that Rowe and Van Eaton had come up with. Okay, the thing about Rowe and Van Eaton, what they had to talk about are the 4 systems of what they call threshold-based management of resources. And they had various factors involved in when you apply those. But one of the things that's interesting about Rowe and Van Eaton is that you can use their technique with any type of planning that you might want to do. They had an example in a reading that I had presented to a class that I taught, where it was in California, and they had all 4 types of planning systems, where you had the pristine, the wilderness areas, then they had the areas that are adaptive management, and then you had the other 3. And the idea is that you take each of the 4 that are like a gradation from the pristine all the way to the urban ecosystem, and you do this technique where they call it coupling, decoupling, and then recoupling. And I like to spend a few minutes on talking about that concept because I think it's very important. I think it's very appropriate for any kind of environmental planning you might want to do. And it includes urban infrastructure and urban sustainable urban governance, because even though we're on that urban high reliability systems, we have to know what's further on down the system as far as pristine areas in order to correctly manage the urban area. So let me talk about the coupling, for example. The way that Rowe and Van Eaton had described this is a technique where you acknowledge all the various ecosystems that are involved in the planning area. They had an area that was several square miles, as I recall, that included wilderness areas, 2 cities. So what you do, you map out what it is that you got. That's the best way to start any project, is that you identify your planning area. So you might look at the wilderness area. What's really going on there? Is it 100% wilderness? Are there plants and animals coming in and going out, or is it really pristine? And what is really required to maintain that pristine area? For example, does it include the requirement that people don't go into those areas? You need to account for all those kind of things. And then you go into the next area and you look at where you might have some inroads of wildlife into the urban areas, and then conflict management, which was the third one. Pristine areas, adaptive management, conflict, and then higher urban areas. So what you do, you look at all those various areas and all the various aspects, and I talked a little bit about the pristine areas. The adaptive management is where you acknowledge that you've made inroads into an area that's not pristine anymore, maybe like the way Yellowstone used to be. But so you accommodate the use by humans and human artifacts and trains and roads and those kind of things. Then you go into the other area and you look at the conflict, where you have more definite conflict, where I mentioned before about deer being hit by trucks and cars. And then, of course, the urban area. So once you've mapped out all 4 of those different types of management systems, you account for what you think they are on the very broad scale. And so then that's the coupling. So then you go through this process called decoupling, where you isolate the wilderness areas, then you isolate the conflict areas, isolate the adaptive areas. Yeah, why don't you just hold on? I'm nobody, you know, just. I know you is. Anyway, so you isolate those 4 areas, and you look more exactly in what goes on in those ecosystems. And then once you think you've got these all lined out, then what you do is recouple. Because the difference between the coupling and the recoupling is that you've thought through exactly what's required for each of those 4 management systems, so that you can integrate the 4 into like one concept. The difference is that if you do it at the first, you're kind of like making excuses for why man's intervention might be good, might not be bad. But once you understand the whole ecosystem that's there at this one point, you can better isolate the wilderness, the adaptive, the conflict, and the urban areas, and then do a better job in the recoupling. So that finishes up the sustainability planning aspect of this presentation. I invite you to go look at the slides that I've presented, and so we can talk about it at our next class that we hold every Monday. So thanks again. That was the end of video number 8, and we'll see you in the next one.